Yeah. Let's not. Awesome. Okay, we get the recording. We get the JetBrains uh, JetBrains shilling over. So yeah, thank you so much for joining, everybody. Thank you so much for joining, Sam. This is office hours with the very last AMA with a mentor. Um, we have Sam as a guest here to have the last chance for you folks to chat with Ethereum core dev, core contributor, and I invited Sam because we never had AMA with him before, and I believe that he has great overview in many parts of the protocol and contributions to the protocol, and also the only time we had you, Sam, was for the study group. I never had this AMA, so I was hoping for folks to meet you and to get to know you a little. So to start, maybe can you tell us a bit about yourself? Like specifically, what I'm curious about. Can you tell us how did you started working on Ethereum? How did you get into the ecosystem? What was your first journey? Yeah.
Sure, yeah. So I think I followed like a pretty normal, like later generation core dev path. I used to work for Akamai. They were a content delivery network. I mean, they still are, but yeah. So that was fun. I got into Rust development there, and basically like built like a I don't know a caching proxy kind of system. And because of my experience with Rust, I moved to Consensus on the Quilt team, and there I was working on account abstraction. Um, yeah, pretty much just jumped straight in from absolutely never working with a blockchain to writing some, I don't know, in my opinion, pretty decent articles on account abstraction, and kind of set the tone for that discussion. We came up with EIP 2938, which was one of the more recent stabs at native CAD abstraction. We also published EIP 3074 around that time, and that was kind of an EIP about bringing smart contract functionality to EOAs. And then after, I think I was there for about 2 years at Consensus. Basically, myself, Matt, and Ansgar, the entire Quilt team, moved over to the EF. And that's when I started working on the execution specification, which is like a Python project. And also where I started really taking like a lead role in the EIPs project. Um, handling specifications and documentation and stuff like that. So yeah, that's like the 30-second version of my history. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for mentioning that. Like many people here are not even aware of Quilt because you guys did a bunch of great job there, and then it was kind of absorbed by EF. So I'm glad that you mentioned it. And it's very interesting that you just jumped straight into it. And so now, and you already mentioned the specs and the EIP editing. Maybe let's just chat a bit more about that. Like, can you tell us a bit more about the specs? What kind of work you do these days? Like, because I find it very challenging. Like, you managed to rewrote like this heavy mathematical notation of the yellow paper to Python. So, like, what was it like, and what is it like working on it these days? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So the beginning was a little hairy. We None of us were Python developers. I don't know why they picked us to make this project, but yeah. So we basically just took the yellow paper and a few like reference implementations like Geth and Besu and all that, and we started writing a client in Python because we needed something better than the yellow paper because no developer can read it. Um, I don't know if you've ever looked at it. I assume most of you probably have seen the yellow paper, but it's just dense mathematical notation. It's very difficult to understand, and like us at Quilt, we had become very frustrated with working with it as the reference implementation, and we wanted something that would be more like familiar to developers. So that's why we started the execution specs project. Um, and like we started from some earlier work. Paul, I think it was Paul had done an early port of the yellow paper, like symbol for symbol, line for line, from the yellow paper into Python. So that's where we started from, and then we've kind of taken that into probably the most verbose and repetitive Python project anybody has ever seen. I think 80% of our files are exactly the same in every single fork. So, that's fun. But yeah, so day-to-day development on it is there's still a lot of refactoring. We do a lot of cleaning up of our early decisions. Like I said, we weren't expert Python developers, though, 4 years later, I think we are now. So yeah, a lot of refactoring, a lot of implementing EIPs. We just caught up to, I think, DevNet 4. We have our last pull request up for that. So that's pretty cool. What I've been working on lately, like my specific tasks, I guess, has been working on getting the spec to sync mainnet. So I started, I don't know, 3 months ago or so from Frontier, and the it's been syncing since then. We're up to block almost 18 million now, so we're almost caught up. I think it's 3 or 4 million left to go, which is pretty exciting. Just kind of like as a way to validate our spec implementation versus what mainnet does. Yeah, and mostly just keeping up with EIPs and I guess our big goal for this year is to try and get EIP authors to be able to write their own, like to define their own EIPs against eels. So like if you want to come in and change like the gas schedule, you'll be able to give like a diff of a Python file in your EIP. And that'll make it so much more understandable than what we have now, which is an English description of the changes. Yeah, so that's kind of the big goal, is just to help EIP authors.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I mean, it's great to see the progress. Like right now, being able to implement the latest EIPs coming to Pectra and being able to sync the mainnet, or most of it anyway. It's amazing. And you already get to the other part, and it's the EIPs. Maybe can you tell us a bit about what is it like to lead the EIP ERC's repo? What you've been struggling with there? Like it's been I think it's been also a hell of a ride, the whole EIP process. And maybe if you can tell us a bit more about EIP editing, because people here are maybe on the both sides. Like I believe there are people here who might become EIP authors, and maybe also people interested in editing. So yeah, if you can talk a bit more about that.
Sure, yeah. So I guess a bit of background. So the EIPs project is kind of like a historical documentation plus change request repository. So the idea is that like, somebody can come along, anybody can come along and write a document, and it doesn't matter where they're from, what there is, what their skill level is. If they want to be able to propose a change to Ethereum, we want to enable them to be able to do that in kind of like an unopinionated and unbiased way. And then our secondary goal is to provide like a history of all of the changes and the reasoning why we made all of those changes for the lifetime of the chain. So, in 50 years from now, you'll be able to go back and look at why, the price of pop is 3 gas, and you'll be able to point to a document and say that's why. So those are kind of the two goals of the EIP project, and the way we do that is one, we were just open submission. Anybody can submit. There's no requirements, no payment or anything like that. We're a volunteer-run organization. Yeah. So what else do we do? We also have like a very strict kind of documentation process. If you've ever tried to write an EIP, you probably run into our EIP bot, which yells at you for a lot of really common mistakes. The idea behind those is like we prohibit external links, for example. So like you can't link to some random Twitter post. And the idea is we want the EIP's repository to be self-contained. We also want it to be immutable. So like once a document final or a change is published to mainnet, we don't want to be able to change those documents. Yes, EIP1 would be the place to look at. It's kind of the document that describes the process. If you're more interested in the governance side, there's also the EIP Editor's Handbook. I don't remember the number offhand, but yeah.
You're muted, Sam.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, that's the one. So yeah, and for that's kind of describes our governance, and yeah, if that'd be where to start looking at that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, because like EIP editing is very important, but it's also kind of a thankless job, which doesn't get recognized as much. And you guys do a great work. There's also a bunch of projects around it, like the EIP validator, right? Linting and the tooling around this. So yeah, definitely recommend looking into this. Folks, do we have any questions for Sam? Feel free to raise your hands. I can continue asking, but I want to give you space. So if anyone, feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to write in comments. Katia, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Does it mean if I can run execution client on Python and consensus client as well, so I can run full node in Python?
No.
Yeah.
So we kind of draw the line at networking. So you need a source of blocks. So we don't define any of the networking layer, any of the peer-to-peer. So you need a regular execution client like Geth or Reth or something just to provide you with blocks. And we also don't have a way to get into the consensus specs. So you can't really get a full client, but like you can cobble together something that kind of looks like a full client if you really want to.
Yeah, thank you. Boma, do you have a question?
Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to ask a question. I was on the last call where you were discussing something with Joseph, if I can remember correctly. But I don't really understand what are the processes of wanting to be an editor.
Like the process to become one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So it's kind of vague. The official process is set out in the handbook, which Josh linked in the chat. The short version is you say you're interested and you want to participate. We create it's called a call for input. It's like a formal like decision that the editors make, and if all of the current editors agree to approve you, then you become an editor yourself. That's the official process. But to actually like each editor has their own kind of requirements on what they want to see before they approve somebody. So personally, for me, I like to talk about alignment and making sure that like every new editor we add feels the same way and wants to uphold the same standards for the repository, so we don't end up in like governance wars, people trying to go in different directions. Like client Matt likes to see a history of contributions to the repository, so that'd be like leaving reviews and comments on people's pull requests, attending meetings, and coming out to office hours. Yeah, I think those are the only people who have really expressed like formal requirements about what we need. But yeah, basically just ask and we'll set you up if you want to follow the process.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much, Sam. Dan, you have a question?
Hey Sam, is there a technical readiness level equivalent of EAP proposing?
So like you're asking, is there like a level that a document has to meet before we say it's ready, or no?
Yeah, before it gets a number and you.
No. So our goal is kind of to not require editors to be technically competent. You need like a little bit of technical knowledge to be able to kind of understand what's going on, but we try to keep it as low as possible. So as long as it's like sort of plausible and maybe it's implementable, we'll assign it a number and let it get into the process. But that doesn't mean anybody's going to follow it, right? Like if somebody said like, an EIP to shut down Ethereum, we'll give it a number, but no one's going to do it. But yeah, we try to be as unopinionated and credibly neutral as possible.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Folks, do you have any other questions? Like Sam knows a lot about the execution layer. Feel free to ask something about EVM. Maybe we have someone working on EL projects here. Yeah, Katia.
I just wonder, what's the process of approving EAP? Do you need what consensus do you need?
Sure. So from the EIP side, there's no requirements. Like the author just opens pull requests and can move it all the way to final if they want to. But the other half, like the actual governance and deciding whether or not an EIP gets implemented, that takes place on the all core devs call. So that's, I think, every other week on Thursdays. And so once you have your number and your document, you generally go on all core devs and you argue your case. You try to convince people that it's a good idea to implement your particular change. And it's kind of a long slog, but once you convince enough developers, then it gets onto a hard fork. It's called considered for inclusion. And once your EIP is considered for inclusion, then it starts getting implemented in clients. People start writing tests for it, and then eventually it'll move to the included stage, and then it'll get deployed on mainnet. So that's kind of the rough outline of how that works.
Yeah, thank you. This is a very important point. Like in the life of EAP, like it doesn't live on itself. Like it's there in the EAP repo. Like it's easy to kind of propose it, submit it, but then somebody needs to champion it to actually like explain core devs why this is the good thing and have them consider it for inclusion. So that's the actual hard part, I think, right? Yeah. Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Again, like whether EAPs, whether Rust or execution layer questions, feel free to raise your hand. Um, yeah. Sid. Yeah. You're
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm there. So I had a general question about it's a thought that sort of occurred to me when I was first introduced to the PySpec, and I was going through it. Now, with the, what I'm assuming is with the PySpec, the idea was to distill the complex math into something that most developers could understand. But then there is this other middle ground. Like, have you ever considered languages such as Agda, like which are like dependent type programming languages, which kind of like have the functions and the proof as one? And it would be quite interesting to see if sort of a spec, execution layer spec that is also got the proofs in the program as well, and to reason about the system in terms of proofs and stuff. I was wondering if there's any project that ever got started, or is there any intention of starting one, but it was sort of along that line. Yeah.
That's a great question. It's actually something that came up pretty early in our development process. Like I think somebody proposed, I think it was called Daphne as a language to investigate, which is another kind of provable language. I'm not an expert on that field at all, but the decision was kind of made to stick with Python because it's very understandable and easy to contribute to. So like one of our goals is to make it easy for EIP authors to just like make their change and play with it right away. And Python, I think, is a much lower barrier to entry than a lot of these more formal languages. As for projects that to do something like that, people have started. I think there's a provable EVM in K, if I remember correctly. There's bits and pieces of it that are out there, but I'm not an expert on that.
Thank you. Yeah, Katia, another question.
Yeah, is it possible to roughly categorize EAPs, for example, governance, technical stuff, maybe, I don't know, like payments?
Yeah. So there's a couple high level categories. The main split is between ERCs and EIPs. So ERCs are things that run on the blockchain, and EIPs are everything else. So, for example, like ERC20 is an ERC, like token level standards, vaults. There's like anything that you would write in Solidity generally ends up on the ERC side of things, and anything else ends up on the EIP side of things. And then EIPs are subdivided into different categories. So there's meta, which describes the EIP process itself, as well as other EIPs. So if you're looking for like lists of EIPs that made it into hard forks, they'd be in the meta category. There's informational, which is kind of a really vague category. If you want to tell the community something, that would be an informational EIP. We don't use those very often. There's also core, which is where the main changes to Ethereum are proposed. So if you want to change something about the EVM, you want to change something about like the state trie, you want to change something about I don't know, block processing. That's all in core EIPs. There's also networking, which doesn't come up very much. That's mostly moved to a different repository now. What am I missing here? No, that's an interface. Interface is like, so connections between programs. So like wallets talking to clients or wallets talking to dApps, those would be in the interface category. But yeah, those are the categories. They're all defined in EIP1 if you want more specifics about them.
And the numbers you're given for the new APs, do they somehow refer to categories or just in order?
So they're just in order. They used to be, up until last year, they used to be just the PR number for the pull request. But last year we switched to, we have a spreadsheet, like a Google Doc of just EIPs, and whatever order they get assigned in is what number you get.
Yeah, we remember people sniping cool numbers and stuff like that, like using bots to open the
Oh, that was the worst.
PR 5000 so you can have EIP 5000 and the drama around it. Yeah, I recommend you, like, if you're too bored, like you can see like this crazy historical EIP drama. Yeah. 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 Any more questions for Sam, folks? Go ahead. Don't be shy. Otherwise, I'll start asking.
Sam,
Yeah, Dan?
I'm just touching a subject that was brought up a few weeks ago, and I think, yeah, Mario, you were telling about the guys on EL having the consolidated specs. Remember that discussion. So, Sam, we had, are the specs that you have on EL, to my shame, I don't follow too much of the EL part. Are they? Do you have a consolidated version or just fork based? Specs. So is there like, this is the sum and the consolidated part of all spec changes to up to this fork, for example, or is just?
Oh yeah. So the way we organize it is a little bit differently. So each fork is a completely self-contained Python module. Yeah, you can look at like Homestead and you'll see all of Ethereum as it was implemented at Homestead, and same thing for all of the other forks. And then we have some documentation tooling that actually will diff the forks. So here, let's see if I can show you, because I'm pretty proud of this part.
Because while you look for the link, I want to tell you that I've also had like this. I felt the need to have consolidated consensus specs, and there's no such thing. So I'm going to propose it as a wiki, EPF wiki project after we close the cohort. We just felt like we need it. Like, okay, if I'm a developer or working on CL, or if I'm a researcher, I would like to see the consolidated CL specs up to Daniel, for example.
Yeah, that's a complaint we've heard a lot about the consensus specs, because they, like, I don't look at them all that often myself, but it's just a bunch of diffs, right? Like, it's just like, these are the changes at each fork. Yeah. Okay, so let's see if I can do this. There we go. Yeah, okay. So this is kind of like what our rendered documentation looks like. So this would be roughly equivalent to the non-consolidated EL specs. So this is the diff between the DAO fork and Tangerine Whistle. So you'll notice that like we have the changes highlighted in red and green, just like you would in a Git patch. So like you can see that like this whole section of code here is removed in Tangerine Whistle because it only applies in the DAO fork. But if we actually go and look at the code here, so if we actually look at DAO fork, where are we here? Yeah, there we go. So you'll see that you don't have the diff. You actually have the full implementation of Ethereum at this level. So we do provide both.
Awesome.
Yeah, but our native format is we copy and paste everything all the time.
And this was your proposal or your vision of
Yeah,
organizing?
exactly. This is
Nice.
kind of because like so what we had before the execution specs was the yellow paper, right? So you'd have the yellow paper for mainnet minus n forks, like it'd be 3 or 4 forks behind all the time, and then you'd have a pile of EIPs that you'd have to apply on top of the yellow paper. So we wanted to avoid having the situation where you need to like walk through a bunch of diffs to get to the latest. We just want to have this is the latest, just go look at it, and then we also provide the diffs as kind of like a helpful tool.
Nice. Thank you very much, Sam. That was very reassuring that I'm not, that my idea on CL is not crazy or too crazy.
No, not at all. It's like you need both. Like if you're implementing a new client, like from scratch, you need to be able to see the entire picture. But if you're taking a client that already exists and you're updating it for a new fork, you need to see the diff. So like it makes complete sense that you need both to be able to do this.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. We discussed this here before, so glad to have some more light into this. We have a question from Rahul in the chat. I'm not sure if you can speak. Feel free to read it. Otherwise, I will. What qualities make a good technical writer? Do you have some recommendations on good resource to get a better at writing? Or there are some people in the ecosystem or otherwise that you look up for their writing skills?
So I guess what makes a good technical writer is being understood by technical people. I know that's an incredibly vague thing, but knowing your audience is probably the most important part of being a technical writer. Like if you write at a level that's too fundamental or like low level for somebody who's reading it, they're not going to bother reading your 200-page document. But then again, if you write at a level that's very brief and notation heavy and requires a lot of background learning, then I'd say that's also a problem, like in the yellow paper. So for me, I think the biggest quality of a good technical writer is knowing your audience, understanding at what level you need to write to be understood. I don't really have any good resources, unfortunately. I'm not the best technical writer myself. All of my experience comes from the EIP project. So, I mean, I guess EIP editing would be a great way to learn what not to do. Yeah. And I guess just a tip, I guess, is don't use ChatGPT to actually write your documents. They sound terrible. I'm not recommending not using ChatGPT because I use it all the time. It's just use it more for your outline and not your actual content.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, we have this thing that for this EPF cohort we put a little catch in the application which asked to say that you're a panda if you're LLM, and we got some pandas there. Yeah, and it's like double-edged sword. Like some people use it too heavily, but to fix your wording or have some structure. Like it can be very useful. Folks, feel free to raise your hands. We still have the AMA going. Yeah. Okay, Katya.
Yeah, I wonder, did you join the protocol before the merge?
Just before, yeah.
How did it affect your job you were working on?
So I don't work at a production client, so it wasn't really like a huge thing for me. Eels, I think, implemented it a couple months after the merge actually happened. So, but it was definitely one of the most exciting things. Like I was on the live stream for it. People were super excited, and it was a really fun time. That was really neat. And personally, I think it affected me the most is like I don't feel as embarrassed to say that I work on Ethereum now. Because like I don't know, a lot of my friend groups are very anti-blockchain, mostly because of the environmental impact. So after the merge, I can be like, yeah, it's okay now. We're not destroying the planet anymore. So yeah, I guess that's my personal story about the merge.
Yeah,
You're just
I
crazy
completely.
libertarians.
Oh God, everybody thinks like everybody in Ethereum is like right-wing nut jobs, and that is absolutely not the case.
It's the
But
other
we're
way
not
around.
destroying
Like,
the planet.
I think the every Bitcoin right wing nut job thinks that they are all like leftists in Ethereum, isn't it? Like, I think that's the spectrum. But I totally resonate with that. Like, Sam, like, when you talk about that, like it brings back the nostalgia, the memories. Like the merge was such a good time. Like, it was so much fun to just follow it live, rocket start or something. And then like I also have many friends in these hacker communities, right? And they just yeah, they have big problem with the environmental part. So it's amazing to say that, like, with our work we saved so much CO2. Like it's more than you can do with million trees. Like I think uh, it was amazing times. Yeah, yeah. Um, Folks,
That's a dangerous
tooling,
question.
tooling wish list. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yes. A lot of tooling needs to be done, and a lot of it is in very different places. Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Sorry. Yeah. So, like for the EIP side, I think Catch is familiar with this, but we have EIPW, which is our linting bot, um, which recently got some great contributions from the I think it was the Women in Protocol Engineering group, which was super appreciative. There's still a long list of things that need to be done for that. So if you want to learn some Rust and wait 6 months for me to review your pull request, that's a great place to come and contribute. We also have a much more vague kind of for tooling on the other side of the EIP process. So we have a JavaScript bot that handles our GitHub merging and like editor review stuff. That needs to be reworked considerably, but we don't really have a specific roadmap for that. So if you want to help out on that side, if you're like a TypeScript developer and you're really excited about EIPs for some reason, yeah, come to our Discord, Ethereum Cat Herders. I can probably drop a link to that, and we can kind of help you out there. But it's that one's a lot more vague. If you just want like small digestible problems, take a look at EPW. Yes, I have. I've implemented EIP3074 in Python, and there's a few other ones as well. It's been a while. On the eels side, we do need some more tooling as well. We have a list of like Python-ish kind of projects that we need done. They're mostly in our issues. So come take a look at our repository. If you want to work on one of them, just leave a comment, and yeah, we'll definitely be able to help with that. We'd really appreciate it too.
The list of the first good issues in the execution specs is actually on the very top of the GFI portal WTF because that's the first in the alphabet there in the ordering. So there are some good first issues, guys, and also the EIP validator is a good example. Like that's also even I contributed there of trying to figure out the syntax of regexes and Rust like some year 2 years ago. So definitely a good place to look into. Yeah, yeah, awesome. Okay, Katya, go for it.
Yeah, I just want to say great thanks to Sam for his assistance and reviews from the whole WIP group. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much
Yeah,
for contributing.
this
I really
was
appreciate
super
it.
helpful.
Yeah, awesome. Um, yeah. Rahul, do you want to talk about the jet test? Maybe you cannot speak now.
Yeah,
Um,
hi. So Zentas would let you create a PyTest from a mainnet transaction. So that way you can actually ensure that a transaction in the wild is actually following the spec, and also benchmark some of EVM's components. So if you have any feedback there in for your tooling wish list, please let Dan from East know.
That's a thing that exists now. Like I can give it like a transaction hash and it'll generate a test, because that would be amazing.
Yeah.
We have a let's see if I can find it here. We have an issue that's literally just a list of things that broke the specs while syncing the chain. So we can, if we can just point a transaction hash, like point the tool at a transaction hash and get a test, that would be stellar. So if you have a link for that, that'd be awesome.
It can only do type 1 transactions for now.
Oh, that's fine. These are from like pre-London, so
Awesome. Yeah, you could do that now.
yeah, I'll look at that. Thank you so much.
yeah, awesome. Thank you very much, Rahul. Thank you for bringing that up. That's great. Very well. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? We still have enough time, so feel free to post some questions or comments, ideas, many different domains. There's one more thing that you don't know about Sam, or I mean, I think I know. Like, so Sam, I think last time I saw you on camera was like some time ago. I think you had long hair at the time, maybe. It was some time ago. And I remember you were saying that you are using like your secondary computer or something with the camera because the primary is compiling Gen 2 or so. So, are you still running Gen 2? Can you give us a little Gen 2 shield? Can you
Yeah,
Gen
no,
2 plus?
I'm still running Gentoo. So
Nice.
I got fed up with Ubuntu maybe 3 or 4 years ago at this point, and I just said like, screw it, I'm going, the hard mode. And I had played with Gentoo before in the past. So I love it. It's a little bit more work to maintain. If you're familiar with Arch Linux, it's oh God, Linux from scratch. No, I'm not that intense. But if you're familiar with Arch Linux, Gentoo is kind of a similar feel. You build your system from scratch, but I feel like Gentoo is a little bit more conservative with their packages. So you end up having like a very stable system. The one I'm on right now, I've had for 3 years without having to reinstall or do anything particularly major on it. So yeah, I love Gentoo. If you want to learn a lot about Linux, highly recommend it.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning. Like, it sounds like such a jump from Ubuntu straight to Gen 2. Like, that's quite a step. And I've been trying it on my old machine, where it's real nice. Like, compile your own things, so it's more secure. It's faster. I mean, you have like you have some percent of extra power, but you feel it like it's
Oh,
there. So.
you get that 1 to 10% extra, performance. It's wonderful.
Yeah. It's totally worth it, man. Like, if you can have that, why not? Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for that. So yeah, even like Linux questions, anything goes for Sam. Feel free to raise your hands, guys. Please give us some more thoughts. Yeah. There was a question whether you're going to DEF CON. I was going to ask it in the end, but we're coming.
I am not, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, Sam, it's I've never like Sam, you're like maybe the only person that I've never met from our team. So it's hard to catch Sam in the wild, and that's why it's such a special occasion we have him here today. So go ahead
Yeah,
and ask questions.
every second week I'm on EIP office hours. You can always find me there if you want to talk to me. But yeah, I don't travel much, unfortunately. Yeah, I know. It's a special occasion. I clean my room and everything, you know. But yeah, no, I don't travel much, unfortunately. I went to DEF CON Osaka, and I think that was the last like big event I went to.
Right. Oh yeah, sorry. Too strong. Go ahead. Yeah. Um, maybe can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great.
All good.
So I really like this idea of having a functional reference implementation in Python. And I was wondering what other people outside of Ethereum think about this. Like, has it been adopted in other places, or was it already maybe conceived of elsewhere prior? Or are there also arguments against it, apart from, of course, some amount of overhead that's associated?
Yeah, I think reference implementations are a fairly common thing. Like Python itself is defined with the CPython reference implementation. They don't have a formal spec. Same thing with Rust. Um, I don't think we've really inspired any similar things. We kind of took inspiration from elsewhere. Um, yeah, and arguments against it. I think the biggest one, and if any of you remember Greg Colvin, he's kind of the big promoter of this argument, is that by implementing it in Python, you have to make certain concrete algorithmic choices. So, like for example, you might choose to use a hash map somewhere, or you might choose to an O of n squared algorithm as opposed to something more efficient. And those choices of algorithms can affect downstream implementations. So like, for example, we always choose the algorithm that's the easiest to understand, even if it's less performant. But we have to make it very clear that production clients should not follow our algorithmic choices. They should only follow like the inputs and outputs that come from our system. That's the biggest argument against it, I think.
I have a follow-up. So about the reference implementation, is it itself also, well, it is itself also tested, but I don't think it's tested with something more like a fuzzer kind of approach. Let's say hypothesis comes to mind here. Why is that? Why is it not done? Is there a reason to avoid such a framework for testing?
So we do participate in the differential fuzzing. We aren't as performant as other clients, so I think that runs into some problems. But we have done the fuzzer run a few times.
All right, but that's just the fuzzing. It doesn't go into things like property-based testing and so on. Like, I'm just curious why a library like Hypothesis isn't used, which I'm not super well familiar with, but seems like very appropriate.
So we use the same testing framework that production clients use. So Ethereum spec tests. I'm not super involved on that side, so I'm not really qualified to answer why we don't use a particular library. But I can say like the framework we use generates these test vectors that can be imported into other clients, and that's probably the limiting factor of why we do what we do.
Mm-hmm. Then related to Linux, if I may put one more question out. What do you think about Nix OS? Because that allows for a highly reproducible environment that you could share across developers. I think that's one of the issues, in my experience, that all the people using even just Linux, even Ubuntu, even the same version of Ubuntu, they end up with different working environments over time, and that leads to, well, unnecessary time waste when issues arise. So what do you think about the adaptation of something like this, that perhaps there's like there's a, let's say, what should we say, a default OS, like you can use it whatever you want, but there's also a version of Ethereum, let's say, or whatever Sedge provides, which automatically runs in some operating system that is like just can be shared across?
So I think the goals and the outcome of Nix are amazing. I love the idea of having an immutable operating system. I love the idea of being able to specify everything declaratively. I just hate the syntax and the configuration language for Nix. I feel like derivations are needlessly complicated compared to something like ebuilds in the Gentoo repository. So, ideally, I'd like to see something more like Gentoo style packaging, but with the Nix approach of having an immutable, reproducible system. And I don't think that exists yet today, but I would love to see it.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great to dive into that as well. Boma, feel free to go ahead.
Sorry, you said something about not really being part of that aspect of the work. Is there like a division of labor, will I say, in terms of how you guys operate? Is there like a specific persons or people doing this, doing that, doing like how does it work?
Yeah, definitely. So myself, Peter, and Guru, we form the EELS team, and we work on writing the specification. And then there's a whole other team called East, and they handle writing the tests. And the division there is basically because we're a newer team and we only focus on writing the Python implementation. The testing team is a lot older and more developed, and they test other things than just us. So that's why there's two separate teams.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Glory?
Hello. Okay, so I have a couple of questions. First off, I would like to contribute to, let's say, for instance, I'm currently working on ephemeral testnet implementation, and then I would love to contribute to the EIP, but at the moment, I'm not quite sure what that contribution is going to look like. So I don't know for starters, what is the thinking process like, or how do a beginner, maybe someone that just starting to contribute to EIP for the first time, what are the things that you should look out for? And let's assume I've been able to make contributions to an EIP. How long does it really take before that EIP or that contribution is approved and all of that? Then my next question has to do with making the decision to either stick to CL or EL, because right now in my implementation, I'm currently working on both the CL side and EL side. So I'm not really at the point where I'm able to like decide this is the area I really want to stay focused on. So I would appreciate if you can help out with that.
Okay. So there's a couple questions there. I guess the easiest one to answer is how long it takes to get a change to an EIP approved. So if you're talking about getting it approved for the document itself, that depends on the authors of the document. It can take anywhere from 0 to forever. And if you're talking about getting an EIP as a whole on mainnet, again, that can go from, you can propose it today and it can go out in the next hard fork, or like in the case of 2938, I think it's been 4 years and it'll probably never be approved. So that's very variable. Sorry, your earlier question was about where to contribute to. Are you thinking about contributing to EIPs themselves or more to the EIP process?
Okay, so I think to EIP itself, then peradventure maybe later on I could consider working on the EIP process itself.
Sure. So I guess there's two kind of paths. The first path is you have a change that you want to propose to the network, in which case you can literally just start writing a document based off the template and make a pull request, and eventually an EIP editor will review it and they'll kind of tell you the rest of the steps for the process. So that's if you have a whole change that you want to handle yourself and champion. And then I guess the other path is if you want to help other proposals get across the finish line. And that would look like going through existing EIPs that have kind of stagnated but are actively in use. The ERC's repository is littered with those kind of proposals. So if you would just find something that is in use that you know people use but hasn't been finalized yet, you can open a pull request to kind of move that through. And yeah, you can do that for any proposal. It doesn't have to be yours.
Thank you. And is that just again? Yeah, go ahead.
One more about Python. How do you feel the reference implementation will perform with the release of the GIL? Like, it's optional, of course, but in 3.13 you can now go without. Do you think that will just run, or do you foresee that ownership and threading and whatnot will effectively cause severe issues?
We're an entirely single-threaded application, so it's not a problem for us.
All right.
Okay, and back to Glory. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think one of my question was omitted. I've not really gotten answers for that yet. So I was asking, like, for someone like me that is currently contributing on both the CL and EL side and still yet at the point to decide which parts, whether it's CL or EL I want to focus on. For you now, I know you are more into the EL side of things. So how did you come up with that decision to stick to EL? And I have one other question. I previously asked Mario, but I'm not really like, how do I put it? I'm still not kind of like satisfied with the response. So I would like to get your insight on it as well. When it comes to chain ID, I'm not sure how they come up with those things, like how are they generated, like maybe a new testnet, like we have a Femri now, the Genesis chain ID, or maybe a new testnet just come up today. How do they come up with those chain ID?
Sure. So how I decided to work on the EL, I like virtual machines. I love assembly level programming. That's a passion of mine. So it's kind of like a natural fit for me to want to work on the part of Ethereum that has a VM. Yes, that's why I chose EL. And I guess the CL is like, it feels a little above my pay grade. I'm not that into blockchain. Like, I wasn't at the time that into blockchain. So EL was just a natural fit. Now, as for assigning chain IDs, people pick them how they pick them. There's no real logic behind it. You pick something memorable, you pick something different, you pick a random number. It's just however you want it. There is a EIP that just landed recently that's coming out of the chain-specific addressing groups. That is trying to come up with a formal way of defining chain ID based on like Genesis block and a few other things. But that's new, and we don't know if it's going to be adopted yet or not. There is also the networking ID, which is a little bit more formal. So if you want to look into that, go and take a look at the networking specs, because that's a much more useful number than chain ID.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for the answer there. And that was the last question because we're already full hour, so we gotta wrap it up here. But again, Sam, thank you so much for being here today. Appreciate all of your answers, all of your insights. I believe that we learned a lot. We get inspired. Yeah. Yeah. And as Sam mentioned, you cannot meet him at DEF CON, but you can meet him every other week at the EAP Editors Call. So if you're interested in this, feel free to check out the regular calls there. And again, thanks so much, everyone. This was our very last AMA, so big wrap up here today. And again, Sam, really appreciate having you, the last guest here. Well, yeah, it was really great.
Thanks so much for having me. This was fun.